apostles, bishops, and like out there on the highways with all sincerity. And hopefully, like this is not DM left. So you lies, you know, that's a black truth. Over. It says why. Alright. 10 and 4. Falsehood. Oh, just 1 second. Here we go. Warfare are not carnal. Through how so stronghold. False start. Casting down and exalted himself against and please ignore and bringing into obedience, which clearly alright. Chapter.
Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. For those of you who are newer here, you may not know it, but the 4th of July is actually something of a hallowed tradition in the halls of the black media, or as we like to call it, the 4th of You Lie. Oh, it is definitely a day to be celebrated, because how often do you get to take a dump on the nation's most hallowed holiday? America's birthday, the Day of Independence, the nation's oldest and most important holiday, or as we call it in black empowerment circles, just another freaking Thursday. Everything about this country is soaked in racism. The founders of the United States were practically all slave owners, and the ones who weren't were supportive of the peculiar institution. And they were also so dedicated to the enslavement and debasement of black people that they singled us out as the only racial group to be mentioned in the Constitution. And they only did that so that they could declare that in the eyes of American law, we are only 3/5 human beings. The national anthem of this country is another example. There's a reason the Star-Spangled Banner was chosen to be America's theme song. It was written by a slave owner. Francis Scott Key was not just a slave owner, but he was also a federal prosecutor who put abolitionists in prison and fought to defend the laws regarding slavery. I did a video a while back about him that's still worth reviewing. See, white supremacy is sophisticated. A lot of black people are in denial about that, and that's the reason why white supremacy has stood for so long. Negroes love to hide their head in the sand. That tragically is a black tradition that needs to die. See, the bad guys completely understand the necessity of not spelling everything out. You don't need to put everything out there in just granular detail. The bad guys are on code. That's the reason why they have the ability to just sit back and give each other a wink and a nod and be fully understood when they feel like they're getting over on us. After all, they've had so much practice at it, it doesn't need to be said. They love the American Revolution, or at least that's what they claim, especially on this day. It's all about the American Revolution. The American Revolution, you gotta be willing to die for this country. Greatest country that's ever existed on God's green earth. Rockets' red glare, bombs bursting in air. Oh, it brings a tear to my eye. All these so-called patriots, they love the American Revolution. That was a pure war. It was God's war. Oh, there was immaculate and innocent. They love the founders of the U.S. too, mostly because they waged that war, right? And how much better would America be if the people merely adhered to the words of its founders? Isn't that what all of these so-called patriots keep telling us, right? All these white supremacists on the white right and the left, they attack black people whenever there's an uprising. But in reality, if these paper-thin patriots actually did believe their pap and gibberish about how important the words of America's founders are, then they would actually be giving black people a pat on the back whenever we decide that it's time for there to be a little noise made. Because in actuality, we're actually the ones living out what Thomas Jefferson himself advocated for. It's true. Black people are actually the only ones upholding the so-called spirit of '76. Now, I'm sure you're probably familiar with Thomas Jefferson's Tree of Liberty quote, watered from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Never mind that Thomas Jefferson wasn't a soldier, and he refused to ever take up arms for any reason. So when the American Revolution was going on, he was chilling over in Monticello and saying, let those other guys die for my country. Yeah, when he was talking about patriots losing blood for liberty, he was talking about everybody else. Coward. That's what he was. And so are the people who adore him so much. Now, the reason I bring up that Tree of Liberty tirade is because he actually wrote it in a letter to John Adams' son-in-law. What the white media and so-called historians usually leave out about this little bit of legerdemain is that this letter was Thomas Jefferson complaining bitterly about how the American Revolution and the attempts to ratify the Constitution were being portrayed by the British media. See, he wrote that letter in 1787, the same year that the Constitution was ratified, and it was against that backdrop that he wrote that letter because apparently the British media, and I presume certain sympathetic elements in the U.S. media, both of whom Jefferson attributed to the British government, were attacking the U.S. government at that time as being in anarchy. Jefferson makes an oblique reference to what today we call Shays' Rebellion, which was an armed uprising that had to be put down, and apparently the Brits were making a big deal about it. But Jefferson was angered by this to the point that he complained that other countries were believing that the U.S. was in anarchy, and that even people inside the U.S. believed it. I guess after all those years of putting out anti-black propaganda and even anti-black laws, Jefferson never figured that he'd be the one on the receiving end of somebody else's propaganda, huh? Now, it was at this point, as he was rebutting the idea that the U.S. was in anarchy, that Jefferson wrote the words, "God forbid we should ever be 20 years without such a rebellion." Well, when you look at the race riots that have taken place in this country, it's happened on the average at least once every 20 years. And yet nobody seems grateful for it. Nobody waxes poetic about, hey, old TJ said, God forbid your 20 years pass without another such revolution. And here black folks are fighting for liberty in this country. Oh, these black folks, they're the real patriots. That's not what they say. These clowns who claim to revere Thomas Jefferson so much, they conveniently forget his words when it comes to black people. But then again, that's why they love a slave-owning rapist like Thomas Jefferson in the first place. Because his degeneracy reflects their own. And that's the reason why you got all these folks psychologically masturbating today. Oh, the 4th of July, the day of independence, the day that we were free to keep all of the money and all of the labor from these black folks. Ain't got to split it up with Britain anymore. That's what they're celebrating. The day that they were able to cut the Brits out of the profits of black people's labor and ingenuity. That's what they're celebrating. One gang of slave owners thought that they were being very clever when they were able to edge out another gang of slave owners. What the hell kind of day is that meant to be?
What is, because that's why I pull this up. Forces for the congregation we're dealing with. And that's the thing with Jake, the so-called founder. It was our condition to celebrate like these behind me. No. You're desolate. Fire shall consume the town. In the heart. Not when he buys. Alright. Let's see. Hold on. Job 30. Right at this. The hypocrite. The world. Countries that are think they were. Alright. And these that were friends. You know. It says upright himself against the hypocrite. Good one. According to the hypocrite, they think they clear and free. He had gained. He delivers that. They want to remove the enemy. Mosque for these people to sway our people, man. Who they really are. So this wild person, Isaiah 13, in his heart, hypocrisy, is that not what he might send? Make empty the soul of the Israelites. And again, or the alright. Just talking about the 5, but people are like, you know, outright to alright, disgusting. And I was going to say place. Despise. Because what's that thing? I used to be on the DC. James. Time that I was the what was this? Fleshy, some shit. Hannibal Lecter's. All the money he ended up, but it didn't that again, and they about the people strings, you know, on himself there. See what Ciroc said. Crit and the what thou speakest. Let's go.
be celebrating. Only a fool celebrates it, or an anti-black racist. Now, if you're taking today as a chance to kick up your heels because it's a day off work, I don't have a problem with that. But if you're somebody who's running around family and fellow soldiers, and the left, they attacked blood for liberty. He was talking about this letter was Thomas Jefferson wrote that letter because apparently the anarchy, believing that the U.S. was in anarchy. God forbid we should ever wax as poetic about, hey, old TJ said, God forbid. They conveniently forget his words when it comes to black people, but then again, that's why they love a slave-owning rapist like Thomas Jefferson in the first place, because his degeneracy reflects their own. That's the reason why you got all these folks psychologically masturbating today on the 4th of July, the day of independence, the day that we were free to keep all of the money and all of the labor from these black folks. Ain't got to split it up with Britain anymore. That's what they're celebrating. The day that they were able to cut the Brits out of the profits of black people's labor and ingenuity. That's what they're celebrating. One gang of slave owners thought that they were being very clever when they were able to edge out another gang of slave owners. What the hell kind of day is that meant to be celebrating? Only a fool celebrates it, or an anti-black racist. Now, if you're taking today as a chance to kick up your heels because it's a day off work, I don't have a problem with that. But if you're somebody who's running around and you're sitting here literally waving the flag and you're saying words like we and us when talking about the American Revolution, well, then you might need to get your mind right. And that means you need to be listening to the black media on repeat. That's a fact. When you see the
even more so, you need. All right. Those affiliated. The scriptures, this is all. Before any of this, I just. Copyright Act made for fair use for teaching. Fair use is a use infringing in favor of. Oh, why do we got this out?
Once every generation uprisings in this country, you got the white media claiming black people are destroying their own neighborhoods. See, they're drawing from the same well as the British critics of the American Revolution that Thomas Jefferson was whining about. They're doing their own variation. Oh, this is anarchy in the black community. It's pure anarchy, I tell you. Actually, it's a lie. The businesses that get burned down, they don't belong to black people. It's part of the reason why they got burned down. They were seen as being economic eyesores by individuals who extract profits and money out of our neighborhoods and put nothing into them. And as for our homes, they go untouched. See, that's the problem that the white media doesn't like to report on. They like to put out there, oh, these Negroes, they're just a bunch of wild animals, I tell you. They like to call these uprisings anarchy. That's what the white right and the white left say about it. But nobody ever recalls the words of Thomas Jefferson. Nobody ever invokes them. Because when it comes to rebellion, well, black people aren't supposed to do that. Rebellion is supposed to be the sole preserve of white people. But black folks, on the other hand, we're supposed to merely obey, not rebel. And this is why we call it the 4th of July. Believe it or not, America's cardinal sin isn't necessarily racism. It's hypocrisy. This nation talks out of both sides of its neck, saying one thing and then doing exactly the opposite. All men are created equal. Nowhere in there did they say white men, but then again, they didn't have to. White supremacy is so deeply ingrained in this society that whiteness is simply assumed. And it doesn't have to be said. Part of white supremacy is that no one else is even considered. So it's not necessary to say white people because under white supremacy, only white people are human beings. If you're talking about something, especially something important, then it's only natural that you're only talking about white people because they're the only ones that things like that would actually concern.
Exactly. Another lie that we've all. All right. The first. Later here. can't remember. Let's look here. Let's get blah 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 was of the American youth this 2617 of a colonel alluding to ride 40 miles in towns at I ride are based on about her father and children. Team report in the evidence back questioned since relatively unknown story gained recognition. He was convinced makers she was speculated grew thereafter. It's being written about on a United States on March 25th. And this could be that has been told. Who knows?
It's not necessary to say white people because under white supremacy, only white people are human beings. So human person.
Something else. Under white supremacy. Everybody else.
American and white are the exact same thing. It's only when they refer to black people that suddenly, well, we need to make sure we put black on there, just to make it clear that we're referring to something other than persons, don't you know? There's no need for them to say all men are created equal except for those black people over there either. Black people are excluded from every arena of this society. And this country has gone to outrageous lengths to make sure it stays that way. So it's redundant to say everybody except black people. Black people have never been allowed on the inside to begin with. This country has lied every moment of its existence since before its founding. This country's very existence is a lie. This country was born in lies and will die in deceit. And I, for one, won't shed a tear for this den of vipers crumbling to dust. After all, does a decent man feel sorrow when a whorehouse burns down? That's like somebody who weeps for Sodom and Gomorrah and yet claims to be a good person. It don't happen. And I gotta tell you, one of the not-so-guilty pleasures that I get from taking down these white supremacist holidays is whenever you get these racists who come across these videos, they just get so mad, and I love it. That's the reason why I ain't gonna stop doing it, and you shouldn't stop either. They get mad. Well, if you don't like it here, go somewhere else. We built this country, fool. You're the one who came here as a tourist. The only holiday that I'm going to celebrate in regards to this country is the day when we gain our independence from white supremacy. See, that's what they don't like. They don't like the fact that we successfully framed American society in terms of morality, and they don't like the place that they themselves occupy in that particular narrative. But it's a position that they put themselves in. We didn't put them there. They chose to be there, and they chose to stay there. So until then, the real cookout for July 4th isn't going to be on your patio or your backyard. Instead, the real American cookout will take the form of this country's cities occasionally having to burn. But then again, these so-called patriots should be fine with that because, after all, we are just upholding that American tradition of making sure that too much time doesn't go by without another such revolution. Right? Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our
Revelation 7. All right. So with that,